The storm was eating the mountains by the time William Grant dragged the last crate of supplies to the old powder magazine.
You are begging for death, Grant. That magazine is cursed. 12 men died in there.
William didn't look up. He slid the heavy beam across the iron-banded door and sealed himself inside. In the dark stone room, he struck a match and nursed a small flame inside the iron stove. From the town, the men of Coldwater watched the magazine the way they'd watch a lit fuse. His dog Judd settled by the stove as the walls began to hold the fire's first glow. Through the narrow gun slit, the world outside was already turning white. The magazine became a dark block of stone, swallowed by the rising wind and first snow.
That magazine will kill him before the cold does. He'll be dead by morning.
And then the storm hit, and the town forgot everything but its own survival. Inside the magazine, William fed the small stove, the orange glow tracing the seams of the stone walls. He opened an old fort ledger, the brittle pages listing supplies that never made it to the war. Somewhere in his memory, a younger William knelt at a snow-covered grave, his hands raw and empty.
That magazine is cursed. In '64, the powder blew and killed 12 men where they stood. Grant's a fool. He'll be dead by morning, and the magazine won't even notice.
In town, Margaret Hull clutched her infant close as the wind rattled the frozen window panes.
Stillness. Not like the silence after a grave. Something else.
He laid another log on the embers, and the fire answered with a slow, steady crackle. Outside, Coldwater braced for the full weight of the storm, every flimsy roof groaning under the load. But the magazine had already withstood fire and death long before the snow began to fall. The blizzard hit them at dusk. Through the gun slit, William saw nothing but a white wall screaming past the stone. He pressed his palm to the inner wall. The granite was no longer cold. It was giving the fire back. A sharp crack echoed over the wind in Coldwater as the livery roof collapsed under the snow.
Get those timbers off. There's a family pinned inside.
Margaret Hull heard the crash from her frozen cabin and pulled her infant closer, her lips moving in prayer. Inside the magazine, the stove's glow strengthened. Judd slept on, his breath steady as the flame. Outside, the magazine sat alone on the knoll, a dark shape in the white fury. The stove smoke whipped away to nothing. A second building caved in. Men shouted into the wind. A woman's scream cut short. Her infant coughed, a thin, brittle sound that the wind outside could not smother. Through the gun slit, William saw only white, but the stone under his hand stayed warm. The storm could not reach inside. By lantern light, William read the old fort ledger, its brittle pages detailing the magazine's construction. Granite walls, 4 feet thick, an earthen berm, a vented roof designed to channel blast pressure upward. He traced the faded map pinned to the wall, his finger stopping on the note, proof against cannonade.
Built to survive cannon fire. Now it's just holding off the wind. Some joke.
Outside in Coldwater, the livery collapsed, crushing the Ferris family's living quarters under a mountain of snow.
Dig them out. Every man grab a timber.
Margaret heard the collapse, but her infant's cough had turned wet and shallow. She rocked and prayed. By the time Silas pulled the first body free, the storm had already taken 3 more souls. The magazine, in contrast, stood as silent and solid as the day soldiers raised its thick walls in '64. Through the gun slit, the blizzard howled harder, but the stone held steady. William fed the stove. By dawn, the blizzard's roar dropped to a hollow whisper, and Coldwater crawled out to count its dead.
We're going to the magazine. Someone has to bring back Grant's body before the storm buries what's left.
You'll lose more men chasing a ghost, Silas. The risk ain't worth a corpse.
I won't leave a man to rot in that cursed stone. We move now.
The small band fought chest-deep drifts, but could not reach the buried door. The magazine was a white mound with only the gun slit showing. Through that narrow slit, a faint orange glow pulsed, and a thin ribbon of smoke twisted into the frozen air.
Smoke! The fools set the place ablaze. He's dead for certain now. No one survives that. The magazine took him, same as '64. We head back.
They staggered back to Coldwater, the news spreading like frostbite. Grant was dead. The magazine had claimed another fool. Inside the warm stone, William never heard them. Judd slept on, and the stove burned steady.
Voices. Out there. Still alive. Easy, boy. They're not coming in.
But the lull was a lie. The blizzard returned like a fist, folding the world back into white. Out in the white, the search party scattered. Silas lost 2 men to the drifts before the town came into view. They staggered into the general store, frostbitten and half dead, the storm's second breath already clawing at the walls.
Nobody else goes out there. The magazine killed another man. Let it keep his bones.
Margaret's cabin caved in with a crack like a rifle shot. She grabbed her baby and ran through the howling dark. She found the store packed with shivering bodies, the air thick with frost and fear. Inside the magazine, William laid another split log in the stove. The walls gave back the heat like banked coals. He listened to the wind screaming again and knew the storm was far from finished. He broke apart an old ammunition crate and fed the dry pine to the stove, the flames devouring it in minutes. Judd's head lifted. A low growl rumbled, then a sharp bark that cut through the wind's howl. Through the gun slit, William saw a small shape staggering through the white, barely upright. He threw the beam aside, wrenched the door open, and hauled the half-frozen boy inside before the snow could bury the entrance. He dragged the boy to the stove, wrapped him in a wool blanket, and rubbed the small blue hands between his own.
Mr. Drake told everyone you were dead. I had to see for myself.
I am not dead, Tommy. But you shouldn't have come. Not in this storm.
I saw the glow from the ridge. I knew the smoke meant a fire, not an explosion.
Your mother will be frantic. We'll get you back soon as the wind breaks.
Outside, the blizzard gave no sign of breaking. Inside, William had another life to keep warm.
Mr. Grant, how come it didn't blow up? They said, everyone who goes in dies.
It's empty, Tommy. The danger was always the powder inside, not these walls.
He led the boy to the narrow slit and pressed a small hand against the warm stone.
Granite 4 feet thick. An earthen berm outside, built to survive cannonballs, not just snow.
Tommy traced the mortar lines with his finger. He wasn't afraid. He was curious. Outside, the blizzard hammered the magazine, but the building gave back nothing but silence.
This place could hold more, if they'd only listen. Tommy, if the storm gets worse, could the magazine be a shelter for everyone?
Mister, they won't come. They think it's haunted. Mr. Drake said so.
The storm moaned, but William's mind was already turning. The fortress might need to open its door. The storm's full rage tore across the valley, a deep roar that shook the magazine like a gunshot.
Get out. The whole roof's caving.
A beam cracked down. Silas fell, blood freezing on his forehead, the store collapsing behind him.
We go to the magazine. It's the only solid stone left standing.
People bundled their children and followed, a desperate line into the white frost already forming on every breath. Inside the magazine, William felt the stone tremble and pressed his palm flat against the warm wall.
We should have listened. We should have come here first.
Save your breath, Silas. We're not there yet.
The magazine appeared as a dark hulk through the white, its gun slit glowing like a star lost on the ground. They leaned into the wind, step by step, toward the only warmth left in the valley. Judd lunged at the door, barking, as William caught a sound through the wind. Desperate hammering on the iron-banded oak.
Mr. Grant, there's people out there. Open the door, please. They'll freeze.
Let them in, and it all changes. The stillness, the heat, the safety, gone the second that beam lifts.
The hammering grew frantic, and Tommy's face broke his hesitation. He threw the beam aside and pulled. The door burst inward. Snow and wind blasted through the narrow opening, carrying a crush of frozen bodies. Margaret stumbled in first, her infant wailing against her chest, falling to her knees on the warm stone. More figures tumbled after her. Neighbors William had never met, their faces crusted with ice, eyes wide with shock at the warmth. Silas came last, dragged by 2 men, a gash on his forehead, his silver beard matted with frozen blood. William caught Silas's eyes, and for a long moment, neither man spoke. Then William pointed toward the stove. He turned to push the door shut against the howling dark, sealing the fortress around the desperate and the proud alike. Inside the packed magazine, William fed the last of his split logs to the stove, the flames eating deep into the dry pine. Around him, shivering bodies pressed closer, and one by one the coughing and shaking began to ease. As the granite walls pushed the heat back, Tommy pushed through the crowd and threw his arms around a woman weeping against the cold stone.
Ma, I am okay. Mr. Grant saved me.
Silas sat against the far wall, his head bowed, the dried blood on his forehead a stark mark of his failure.
William, we owe you our lives. That store would have been our grave.
Just keep the fire alive. We're not through this yet.
The stove was no bigger than a camp oven, yet every soul in the room could feel the heat soaking into their bones. The walls themselves had become a second fire, slowly releasing the stored heat into the packed room. The curse that had emptied this building for years was nothing but fear, and tonight, that fear was dying with every passing hour. Outside, the storm reached a pitch that shook the stone floor like continuous cannon fire.
This magazine was built for war. 4-foot granite, earthen berm, a vented roof to channel the blast upward. In 64, black powder caught fire inside. 12 men died, but the building didn't fall.
The stone held. The roof didn't buckle. It was never the walls that were dangerous.
Mr. Grant, if the building held, why'd everyone call it cursed for so long?
Because men remember the bodies, not the walls. The real danger was the powder inside.
He crossed to the wall and tapped the faded map, pinned there, the old notes still clear.
These stones remember how to hold. They've been doing it for 40 years.
Silas lifted his head against the far wall, and something in his hard eyes began to give way. And in the crowded, warm stone room, the truth settled over them all like the heat from the walls, The storm struck its worst blow then, a cannon crack of old pines snapping in the wind, the magazine shuddering to its foundations. A child screamed, and the crowd pressed together, but the stone did not yield. William sat down by the door and traced the red arrow painted on the wall, his voice low and even.
I had a wife once, a son, 3 winters ago. We froze in a cabin. A neighbor swore was warm enough. I came here because I needed walls that wouldn't fail. Not because I am brave, because I couldn't live through a lie again.
Silas kept his head down, the firelight carving hollows under his eyes. The room had gone so silent that the hiss of snow against the gun slit sounded like a voice.
No one's going to freeze tonight, William. Not in this place.
William looked at her, then at the boy, and something in his chest that had been locked tight began to loosen. Outside, the blizzard howled on. Inside, the fortress had become something else entirely. William looked into the stove. Behind the glowing grate, the woodpile had shrunk to a single handful of split pine.
Grant, take my coat. It's wool. Burn it if you have to.
I won't take your coat, but I will burn the last of the wood.
He fed the last dry sticks into the fire, and the stove roared like an animal given one final meal. The iron glowed cherry red, and the heat surged outward, driving the shadows back against the walls. A child's fingers had turned the blue-white of early frostbite, and the mother pressed them closer to her chest.
I misjudged you, Grant.
The settlers drew closer, sharing the borrowed heat, their breath mingling in the still air. The stove burned on, the last of the wood sacrificing itself to the cold that could not get in. Through the gun slit, the blizzard cried out, but inside the fortress, the gamble had been made. Hours passed in the dark. The stove's glow died to a whisper, and frost crept along the gun slit's iron edge. Through the gun slit, the sky had cleared to a brutal, star-pricked black, but the opening itself was sealed by a crust of ice. The magazine's stored heat began to fade. Breath plumed white in the dim firelight.
Hush, little one. The wind can't get us in here. Hush now.
The quiet melody drifted through the stone room, and for a moment, even the fear seemed to still.
Mr. Grant, are we gonna die tonight?
Not in here. Not tonight.
Then from the valley came a low, deep rumble, the sound of the town church roof caving in. In cold water, the last tall beam snapped, burying the altar under a mountain of ice. But the magazine did not shake. The stone held. In the darkest hour, Silas Drake pulled himself upright against the stone wall. and every eye in the magazine turned to him.
I was wrong. My own grandfather died in this magazine in '64. The fear's been in my bones ever since. I made the curse, Grant. I fed it all these years because I couldn't face what happened here.
The room held its breath. Not a child stirred.
Can you forgive a foolish old man?
William filled a tin cup with melted snow and held it out.
Fear's a cold room, Silas. I know.
Through the gun slit, the wind's shriek had softened to a low moan. Silas took the cup, and for the first time, the two men faced each other without the weight of the curse between them. Outside, the storm was beginning to die. Inside, the fortress had saved them all. The first light revealed a door sealed in iron and ice. 3 men put their shoulders against the oaken planks until the ice shattered and the bolt gave way. William stepped out first, Judd plunging into the drifts. The air burned his lungs, but the sun was climbing. He climbed atop a snow ridge and looked back at the magazine, its red arrow catching the first light. Below, where Coldwater had stood, there was only wreckage, frost-shattered beams and flattened roofs. The church steeple a pile of kindling. The refugees staggered out behind him, their faces lifting from the ruin to the solid stone that still stood. Silas came last, his eyes fixed on the magazine, the dried blood on his forehead, and lets the feeling finish net. A dark crack against the white. He stood apart from the others, staring at the solid stone, the red arrow stark against the fresh snow. Then he walked to the wall and pressed his palm over the faded paint.
It was never a warning. It was a mark of strength.
The magazine stood as it always had, unbroken, waiting, the warmest building for miles. The survivors walked among the splintered beams of Coldwater, pulling what little remained from the ruins.
The magazine will be a shelter now. No more curses, no more fear.
Margaret and Tommy helped hang blankets inside, while men split fresh wood for the stove.
Mr. Grant, are you a hero now?
No, Tommy. I just trusted stone over stories.
Silas commissioned a brass plaque for the door. Grant's Refuge, the warmest building for miles. The red arrow was repainted, fresh and bold, no longer a warning but a landmark.
You gave us more than a roof. Grant, you gave us the truth.
William just nodded and went back to stacking wood, as if the walls had done the real work, and the word spread. The old powder magazine at Fort Coldwater had saved them all. When the first thaw softened the snow, William packed his few belongings, intending to move on before the spring mud.
You can't leave, William. This place is yours. We're yours now.
William set his pack down by the stove and looked at the walls that had held them all through the worst.
From now on, the weekly meeting is here, the warmest room in the valley.
Outside, children carved paths through the snowmelt, their laughter echoing off the stone. Tommy led the pack.
I was so busy fearing the dead that I forgot the living could still be saved.
The red arrow on the wall had become a landmark for travelers, pointing the way to safety. William built a rough shelf for the old fort ledger, and the map stayed pinned to the granite. A reminder, the magazine stood unchanged, but the world around it had been remade by the truth it held. No one in Coldwater ever spoke of the curse again. They had a fortress now, and a man who taught them that walls could be trusted. A year after the blizzard, the town gathered at the magazine. A brass plaque read, "Grant's Refuge, the warmest building for miles."
We stand here because one man saw a fortress where we saw a grave. I fed a lie for 60 years and it nearly killed us all.
The walls did the work. I just opened the door.
Margaret's little one, now a toddler, wobbled across the grass and grabbed Judd's fur. The old dog didn't move. William stood apart, his hand resting on the red arrow, a faint smile touching his weathered face. The plaque's words seemed to warm the air. Grant's Refuge, the warmest building for miles. The ceremony ended, but the laughter of children echoed off the stone, the same walls that had once held only silence. And the old powder magazine, once a tomb, stood as the heart of Coldwater, and on the door, a simple wooden sign, Grant's Refuge. As the last of the townsfolk drifted home, William and Silas sat alone on the stone step of the magazine, the sunset painting the red arrow gold.
How did you know, William? Truly, how did you know this place wouldn't kill you?
I didn't know, but I'd already frozen once because someone promised a wall would hold. I couldn't do it again.
Silas let the silence stretch, then spoke what he'd been holding all year.
You built the fourth wall, son, the one that holds the heat in.
William's lips curved, a small, real smile, the first any of them had seen. Judd rested his heavy head on William's knee, and the man scratched the old dog's ears, watching the fire die low. The red arrow on the stone caught the last ray of sun, as it had every dusk for 40 years. The walls had never failed. The man who trusted them had found something he thought he'd lost forever. The warmest building for miles had always been there. It simply waited for someone brave enough to open the door. Summer, wildflowers bloomed around the magazine's stone, and the children of Coldwater claimed the knoll as their own. Tommy, now a little taller, led the younger ones in games around the old gun slit. Their laughter a new kind of wind. Autumn turned the valley gold, and the magazine stood unchanged, its red arrow a constant in the shifting seasons. When the first snow of the next winter fell, light and gentle, it dusted the brass plaque and the freshly stocked woodpile. At dawn, a thin plume of smoke rose from the vent, a sign to every traveler that warmth waited inside. William, with a touch more gray in his beard, sat by the stove with Judd, the shelves around them lined with supplies for whoever might need them. Spring came again, and the red arrow had become a landmark for hope, not fear. A dark cloud gathered on the distant peaks, promising another storm, but no one in the valley was afraid. The gun slit glowed steady through the night, a beacon that promised the walls would hold, and the red arrow stood clear and proud above the door, always pointing the way to the warmest building for miles.